Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyersportsbetting.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, I did not post a football video last week because I didn't see a clear edge last week before the games took place. In other words, it was unclear to me who was going to dominate and why. As it turned out, the home teams dominated and did well. For the Super Bowl, though, I do see a clear edge. So I'm back online with this video. I like the New England Patriots laying 3 points over the Atlanta Falcons. Let's talk about why. Just a list of reasons. First, I believe New England has a superior defense. A great source to look at for the numbers is footballoutsiders.com, a website I believe in more than most. Right? I also believe that New England has a more diversified offense. They're not as reliant on one player as Atlanta is reliant on Julio Jones. Right? To me, that makes them harder to stop. This last game, Chris Hogan was the person who got outside the box and who did a lot of big things. Right? Tom Brady is a guy who can operate without Rob Gronkowski. Right? He'll hit the open receivers. He likes to say his favorite receiver is the open receiver. I believe that makes New England harder to stop than Atlanta, where if I have Malcolm Butler, one of the league's better corners, up on Julio Jones like he was up on Antonio Brown, who ended up with less than 80 receiving yards in the AFC Championship game. And if I can slow down Julio Jones, I believe that takes a big chunk out of the Atlanta offense. Alexa, off. I also believe that New England has the superior coach. Right? Bill Belichick is headed to his 7th Super Bowl as a head coach. Right? I understand Dan Quinn has been to Super Bowls as a defensive coordinator and now is going back as a head coach. I like the depth of Belichick's experience more. Right? He's been to Super Bowls as a head coach. I believe there's a big difference between being the vice president and being the president. Right? Let me also point out, too, that in my opinion, New England has the superior QB. I'm aware that Matt Ryan had an MVP season, but understand Tom Brady, like Aaron Rodgers in my opinion, Tom Brady is historical. Right? Now, it's interesting to note that Pete Carroll's background is defensive. Right? So, in 2012, and keep in mind, Pete Carroll is Dan Quinn's mentor. Dan Quinn earned his stripes as defensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. So, just to understand, in 2012, and I understand this is the year before Dan Quinn gets there, but in 2012, Tom Brady played the Seattle Seahawks in a game New England lost. But what's significant for our purposes is the fact that Tom Brady in that game against, we'll call it a Dan Quinn style defense, right? It's, you know, the Legion of Boom, Pete Carroll, Seattle's defense, right? Against that defense with that secondary, which is better than the young secondary that Atlanta has today. Tom Brady in that 2012 game threw for 395 yards. Right? 395 yards. When Tom Brady faces that defense years later in the 2015 Super Bowl, right? Everyone's focused on the end of the game, right? The interception, the decision not to give Marshawn Lynch the ball down around the goal line. But if you look at the film of that game, what's remarkable is Tom Brady in the fourth quarter. Right? They could package that fourth quarter and just call it how to play quarterback in the National Football League. right? It's a brilliant quarter by Tom Brady at the biggest moment of the season. Does it get bigger than the fourth quarter of a tight Super Bowl? And Tom Brady ended that game against a legendary defense, right? Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas. You know, this is Seattle before Russell Wilson gets the big money. So they're spending a lot of money on defense, right? Tom Brady in that game, in a Super Bowl, throws for 328 yards and completes more than 70% of his passes, right? Let me point out, too, that I think New England obviously has the superior Super Bowl experience. Several New England players have Super Bowl experience. They won't be overwhelmed by the process. You know, those media days when some players, Marshawn Lynch, felt the need to say, I'm just here so I don't get fined. In other words, it's so overwhelming that a lot of players are amazed by it. New England's players are not going to be amazed by it because they've been there and done that. This is the first time for the Atlanta Falcons. Let me point out, too, that as you look at Tom Brady's numbers, as you look at New England's numbers, just understand that somehow this team that was the 1 seed in the AFC, right, that finished the regular season with a 14-2 record, is actually undervalued, right? Buffalo's win over New England, their 16-0 shutout of the Patriots, did not involve Tom Brady, as Tom Brady was ineligible to play. Tom Brady has lost only one game all year when he's the starting quarterback. Now, I'll concede this, and that game deserves closer scrutiny, right? What's troubling about the game Brady did lose at home was that it was to Seattle, where, of course, Dan Quinn used to coach and where he presumably still has friendships. Now, I don't believe Dan Quinn would have gotten the Atlanta Falcon head coaching job without the endorsement of Pete Carroll, right? Presumably, Dan Quinn is still friends with Pete Carroll. And Quinn could pick up the phone and call his mentor, who actually beat New England this year. And presumably, Dan Quinn could pick his brain. Also, keep in mind, too, Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator in Seattle. He presumably could pick up the phone and call the guys on that unit, Cam Chancellor, right, Sherman, Earl Thomas, and say, fellas, what is it that worked? Because the New England offense was shut down that day. So I'll agree, if you believe in the Atlanta Falcons, you need to look at the Dan Quinn coaching tree, and you need to focus on that New England-Seattle game, right? Let me also point out that since we're talking about the past, just understand that Matt Ryan is 0-2 against Bill Belichick, but be aware that in the 2013 game, the most recent game that Matt Ryan played against Belichick, Ryan did put up 421 yards. 421 yards. So I'm expecting the ball to be up in the air in this Super Bowl, but I am expecting New England's experience, right, in Super Bowls, Tom Brady's experience against a Seattle Seahawk type of Dan Quinn defense, the Falcons' inexperience in the secondary that has multiple second-year players, and the fact that several Patriots are underrated. Look, I know LeGarrette Blount, former Steeler, got stopped by his old team, this last Sunday. But LeGarrette Blount is one of the better running backs in the National Football League, as is Dion Lewis, right? Chris Hogan showed you that he's an above-average wide receiver, right? Then you throw in people like Malcolm Butler, key defenders, right? And a defensive scheme that has continuity. And to me, it adds up to a cover. I like New England both on a money line and laying the 3 points over the Atlanta Falcons in the 2017 Super Bowl. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. If there's an angle here that you think bettors need to explore, if there's some metric that you feel is being underemphasized or underreported by the media, then I hope you leave those comments in the comment section to this video, right? This site is intended to be for gamblers, right? Gamblers, pick up the phone, leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.